This is Sweet Radio SVG. I'm Cleo. I'm your host for Pure Vincy. Pure Vincy is the program where we celebrate everything Vincentian. We celebrate our poets, we celebrate our authors, we celebrate our musicians, our vocalists. We hardly ever celebrate our sportsmen. And as you can see from my screen, I have none other than Thaddeus Michael Findlay. Mikey is my guest for this evening. And Mikey, Mikey, you see me, I'm still beaming from ear to ear because this is such an honor for me to be celebrating Pure Vincy with you on Sweet Radio SVG. Pure Vincy, as I said, is a celebration of everything Vincentian, and we do it every Saturday from 9 o'clock, from 7:30 to 9:30 in the evening. But for the month of October, I wanted to make it special. I wanted to celebrate some Vincentian icons, and you are my first icon. Welcome to Sweet Radio SVG. Mikey, welcome to Pure Vincy.
Thank you very much, Cleo. It's a great pleasure to be on your program and to be interviewed by you. I'm not sure if I told you this before, but you and Stephen are two of my favorite people in St. Vincent.
Oh,
and, really,
thank you.
Really, in fact, Stephen is Enstala's godfather. So that tells you how much respect and warmth. When Stephen lived at Grenadines, they played cricket and football in the area quite often, sometimes in my backyard. So we have a lot a lot going for us. So it's really a pleasure, Cleo, to be interviewed by you.
The honor is mine. I refer to you as a sportsman, but there's so many dimensions to Mikey Findlay, and I want to cover them all. Well, I'm going to try my best to cover as many as possible, because usually when we talk about you, I think we only just touch the tip of the iceberg. So I want to try to cover as much of Mikey as I can in the next 2 hours that we spend together. And ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know, the music that you hear on the program this evening are all Mikey's selections. So Pure Vincy comes to you from Cleo and Mikey this evening. Mikey, let's get started with your number one pick.
Who are the cricket champions? Combine in the Caribbean. Combine, who is the greatest? Combine in Caribbean cricket. Combine, well we lost to Vincy, but we span Guyana. Rain saved Trinbago, then he killed Jamaica. Combine hard, rain hard, we beat them bad.
Mikey, those first two games that Beckett referred to, Guyana and Barbados, were you a part of the team then?
Yes, those were the early days of the combined islands. As you know, we played in what was then the Shell Shield, the West Indies Cricket Championship, as a combined Windward and Leeward team. We called it the Combined Islands. And we were underdogs because we hadn't been exposed to first-class cricket in those days. And when we started, we were beaten left, right, and center. And then we started beating people. The first person we beat was Guyana, and in the order that Beckett sang it. And then we gained recognition. And I'll tell you, Beckett is a passionate cricket fan, and more passionate about the Combined Islands in those days than maybe anybody else. Incidentally, Beckett has the most calypsos on cricket. I think he has 12, and tops the list of the number of calypsos on cricket. So
Mikey, it had to be you. Thank you for that little tidbit. I actually plan to interview Beckett for this series as well. So I have to remember to ask him about that and that passion for cricket. Before we go any further into cricket, Mikey, I want to deal a bit more with your formative years. You are originally from Trumaka, although most people know you from Grenadines, from Kingston generally. Tell me about life in Trumaka.
You have to imagine a village in those days which was so remote that there was no road transportation. We came to town by launch, There was the Eric and Vida, belonging to the Selectors, politician Sam Slater, coming from Chateaubriand, passing into Tumaca Bay, and then going on to Barley and Layu, and then to Kingstown. And then there was the Daisy D, which was owned by the Days family of Gordon Yard. That was more modern boat and faster. So that was people's choice, the Daisy D. So that's how we came to Kingstown. And in fact, when I played for the Tumaca Primary School in the National Primary Schools Cricket Championship, we came up on the boat, got to Kingstown early, played the game. The game had to finish by midday because the boat was going back down at that time, and we caught the boat to go back down. And that's how we operated. Later on, of course, the roads were open, the roads were cut, first of all. There wasn't surface in terms of pitch. It was the raw dirt, and the buses began to operate and so on. So it was much easier for transportation then. But life in rural St. Vincent was fantastic. I'm not sure. I've spoken to a number of my friends from the rural areas, and they agree with me that that's the best life you could have. We are lucky. We've had two bites of the cherry, as it were, because we enjoyed rural living, and we are now enjoying life in the city. As we got mature, we began to enjoy another dimension of life in the city. So you want something on life in Tumaca?
Yes.
Well,
tell me, what are some of your memories, your treasured memories from life in Tumaca?
Now, I lived for most of my formative years with my grandmother, because my father, Edward Findlay Fitzroy, who was from Chateaubriand, and my mother from Tumaca. She used to work in Chateaubriand with the Morgans, the Morgans, a big family name in Chateaubriand. And she worked with them as a helper. In those days, they were domestic servants. And so she walked from Tumaca to Chateaubriand. And naturally, she met the old man in Chateaubriand, and he must have accompanied her back to Tumaca. Sometime I was tempted to ask her one day, where did you all first hold hands? Where did you kiss on the way from Tumaca?
Trust you to want to know something like that.
So then he went to Aruba to work at Lago, the oil refinery, as many Vincentians and people from smaller islands did. And she went down to meet him a little later, and I stayed on with my grandparents for a while. I went down with them, but I came back. They sent me back to get my secondary education. I started primary education in Aruba, in San Nicolas, and then I came back to St. Vincent and had my formal primary education with Tumaca, a government school. And that's where I had my roots. That's where my formative years were molded. My grandmother, Yulin Tipapatu. I had three aunts. There were Stella, Elna, and the youngest one then was Nina. Auntie Nina was a seamstress. And my grandmother, these are all the things I enjoyed about country life and life with my family. My aunt was a seamstress, and my grandmother was a farmer. So sometimes on Saturdays, if I didn't have cricket, I would go to the mountain past Rose Hall, a place called Miss Mary, with her, and fantastic. She walked with corn pork, and everything else was at the ground, in the mountain, in the farm. You had whatever yam, dasheen, tanya, breadfruit. There was spring water.
Wow.
There was a coconut tree. There were avocado pears. There was mango tree. So that you had lunch and you had dessert. And it was all natural. She picked everything from the ground and cooked it. That was fantastic. The strange thing about that, though, and there's a calypso in Trinidad who sang this calypso about a little boy on the donkey. I don't know if you remember that calypso.
Yes.
Yes. Well, every time I hear that calypso, I remember my grandmother, because she had a donkey, and She would put me on the donkey. Of course, I was a little boy. She would put me on the donkey. Right, I would say, but Granny, why don't you ride? I'll walk. I'm young. She said, no, you stand, you sit up there.
So Mikey, maybe they overheard one of your conversations.
I don't know, but every time I hear that calypso, I remember my grandmother. She was a fantastic woman. She could cook, and Cleo, those were the days when the kitchen was outside. You baked in a drum, those drum ovens with the fire on top and underneath. And I thought,
would you believe it, Mikey? It was only in 2020 that I had the privilege of having bread from one of those drum ovens. No, I lied. It wasn't a drum oven. It was a brick oven, an outside stone oven.
That's right. But the same principle. There were those days too. There were the brick ovens, but those were the bigger class of people, if you want to call them that. We could afford that, but we could only afford the drum. And that bread and that doughboy was the best bread and doughboy you could ever eat.
I could only imagine.
My grandmother used to do a fantastic breakfast. Cornfish, and it was tuna. We called it skipjack, as the local name. And when you corn the skipjack, and you put it out to dry, and it's cured and everything, it's lovely. It's lovely. And when you see my grandmother do that with onions and tomato and chive and all those lovely things, and on Sunday morning you have the local made bread from the oven. Oh, Cleo, that was fantastic. I
hope you inherited some of her culinary skills.
I didn't.
Oh, poor Jean. No.
In those days, and my mother did, and my sisters have done from her. So whenever I go to New York, my sister after me, who is Phyllis, she's a fantastic cook. And so they spoil me totally when I'm in New York. And she do all these things. She knows what I love, and she do all those things. But that's all part of the country life. And so I was telling you about my aunt Nina. So when Tita, who's my grandmother, had dry peas to sell, she would have the dry peas in a bag and would sell it to people from time to time. And then I would sometimes I hear my auntie say, Mikey, come out the window. There's a window which was low enough. That was the top side of the house. And the top side of the house was the main road, Chumuka main road going down to Rosebank and Chateau. And she'd pass this bag out to me with dry peas. And she said to me, go and sell this. This is our pocket change.
Oh, your co-conspirators.
I tell you, and I had such a fantastic relationship with my auntie. Oh, and there's the other auntie, is Sister Elna. Her husband was a farmer, and she made the best doughboy and fried bakes you could think about. And whenever she knew I was coming down to Chumuka, she would prepare these special things for us. And we come back up with everything that we wanted. They grew a white yam, Cleo. I haven't seen it's still around, but it's not as good as it used to be. The thing has changed a bit. But it was so nice. All you needed to do was boil this white yam, put some butter over it, and you could eat it like that. It was fantastic. All that is part of the country life. Now, we had chores. Everybody in the house had a chore. The boys had to sweep the yard, fill the drum with water, take care of the animals, whether it's the sheep or cattle or whatever. The cattle we left in the farm, but the sheep and goats we brought back home at evenings. So we had to take them out in the morning and bring them back in the evening. We had to fill the drum. There's a standpipe on the road just above our house, and we fill the buckets, fill the drum, and that's what we used to bathe with. And of course, the drinking water was put in something separate. And luckily, we lived very close to the school. There's one house between us and the school. So we could have stayed at home and hear when the first bell rang. The first bell is always a warning bell. You have 15 minutes to get into school and so on. So we could stay there and wait until we hear that bell, and then we go across. but so we had our chores in the morning. We had our what we need to do in the evening. Of course, there was no electricity. Everything was by candlelight, and or lantern or lamps with kerosene. Later on, when people got organized from Aruba or Curacao, they were sent back the kerosene fridge. So a lot of people in the rural areas had these kerosene fridge, and they worked very well.
Never heard of a kerosene fridge.
You never heard of the kerosene fridge? No, it looked like an ordinary, it looked like a modern day fridge, except that underneath the fridge itself was a container for gas, or kerosene. And that is what kept the fridge cool, because you lit that and it kept burning, and the scientists knew what they did, but it was fantastic. So later on we got that. Before that, what the entertainers did and the shopkeepers did, they bring down the blocks of ice from the Nobrigo, big blocks of ice. They would tie them onto the back of the truck, bring them down, put them in a hole with some sawdust to preserve it. And every now and again you go and you chip off some ice and you use it with what you want. So all that made country life so fantastic.
It was simple, but it was rich.
It was wealthy. Everybody was family.
Wonderful.
My uncle came back from Curacao. He bought a boat and he went fishing. And on his way from the bay, that's not the Chumoko Bay where the boats came in. There's another beach further down in the village. By the time he got home, almost all the fish was given away. That's how
that sort of family.
That's how it was a.
That's why we love our St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's what makes us pure Vincy. I want to take you back to, well, you spoke about starting your cricket at the Chumoko Primary School. And I mean, on reflection, it should have been obvious to me that that's where you started your cricketing career in primary school, because most great athletes have a very early start. So can you tell me a bit about the early days of Mikey and cricket?
Again, there were a number of people in the village who influenced my life in cricket directly. Our head teacher at the primary school, Benny Marshall. Benny Marshall was Jill Marshall's father. All men those days were passionate about their cricket. More so the headmasters. So wherever you found a school with a headmaster's principal, that school would do well in cricket, because cricket was the main sport. Football wasn't introduced to the rural areas in those early days as yet. So everybody played cricket. And in fact, we since Chumoko Primary School won the National Primary School Cricket Championship one year, and there was a system where the champion primary school would play against the St.Vincent Grammar School in a match, and it was the primary school combined team. And one year I made that team, and that's where we met Douglas Cambridge. And Douglas and I went on to play for St. Vincent. But in the Chumoko Primary School, there was a playing area right in front of the school, apart from the Chumoko playing field itself, which is now occupied by the Chumoko Ontario Secondary School. And so we had two bites. We were able to run about and play on the area in front of the school. And there's where we played most of our goo-goo cricket. You know the goo-goo tree? The spiky tree with a bunch of little things. We used bamboos to pick the branches, to cut the branches. We cut about 4 branches at one time, piled them up as the wickets, and we played until those 2 bunches were finished. We used the top of the coconut branch. We shaped it into a bat. And you'll be surprised to know there was some that could hit harder and send the goo further than others. It depended on how pure the branch was. And the people who made those bats got the technique and the art, and they did that. So that was the fun thing. And then when we were playing serious cricket, we went down to the Chumuka playing field. I don't know if you ever heard of a place called German Gutter. German Gutter is a big gutter that almost split the village of Chumuka in two. It kept breaking. And just below the playing field is the German Gutter. So quite often between the playing field and the gutter itself, a number of cricket balls were lost. So when we played a match there were people in that area who would go and search for the balls when they were hit down there. So it's all a big fun. But that's how I learned my cricket. I had people. My uncle, he was the games master of the school. I told you how passionate Benny Marshall was about his cricket. There's a guy called Harold Bentic. Now, I'm not sure to this day what level of education Harold Bentic had, but he was years ahead of his time. Harold got us to form, as young boys, we were 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, and he got us to form a club called Champions. And after practice, in fact, the school got, the cricketers in the school got the Friday afternoon off to practice our cricket from 1 o'clock. Uncle Findlay went down with us to the park and taught us, and we practiced our cricket. And then those of us who were members of Champions stayed on for the club's practice. Later on, the school practice was finished about 3:30. So from 4 o'clock onwards until it's dark, we would be practicing with the club. And we had our meetings once a week after the practice sessions. And Harold Bentic, at his home, he had the meeting at his home, and he would call on one of us. You get up and say the prayer, because he was a religious person. He was a spiritual Baptist, and then we would start the meeting with a prayer, and he would talk first about the finances. Before you got to the meeting, he would say to us, "Don't forget, guys, walk with a trump." Now, a trump is a subscription. It was called a trump in those days, a subscription. And he said it didn't matter how much you have. If you have a halfpenny or a penny, walk with it. So that's how we contributed to the finances of the club. And then, you know, in those days, village cricket was a very popular thing. You would go from village to village to play cricket, and the village cricket is something else. I'll come to that in a while. Let me just finish off this part about Harold Bentic. And Harold would say, call us at random. Okay, imagine, guys, that you went to Greg's last holiday and you played a match, and the people of Greg's treated you royally. You know, they fed you well, you know, they were very kind to you and so on. And the cricket was lovely. So you get up, and he points at one of us, and you move a vote of thanks to these people. You know, years after, I'm saying, where did Harold get that insight? He taught us to pray. He taught us the value of making a subscription to the club for its development. And he taught us public speaking, apart from the discipline and so on and so forth. And, you know, Cleo, when I got on the West Indies team, there were a lot of people there from the bigger islands who didn't understand what it was like to do a public speech, you know. And I said, but there is Harold. I don't think Harold had more than a primary school education, but he was beyond his age in terms of his knowledge of cricket and his knowledge of what it takes to make a rounded human being. So
Mikey, that is an amazing story. And I don't know Harold, I don't know his people, but I'm so proud of them all, because I have had this discussion with several different people on several occasions. I've listened to our athletes from the Caribbean and from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Not that I'm knocking anybody in particular, but I have listened to them and I have been disappointed time and time again in their ability to just deal with a simple conversation between an announcer, an interviewer, a commentator, and themselves. So I guess we're going backwards.
Well, I wondered that myself. You know, it shocked me. I'll give you a story about on my first trip to England with the West Indies team. The first evening we spent at the hotel, the Waldorf Hotel on the Strand. It's an old hotel, but it's very comfortable. And in those days, the West Indies couldn't afford a luxury hotel, a five-star hotel as they can now. So we sat down that evening to dinner, and each group took a different table. Well, the table that I was at, the waiter came across and took our order. Tell us ordered what they wanted. And there's this one chap, I'm not going to call his name, and the waiter said to him, "What are you having, sir?" And he looked at the waiter and he put his head back on the menu. So the waiter thought that he hadn't made his mind up yet. Then he said what he wanted. And he wanted a steak. The next question was, "How do you want your steak done, sir?" And he looked at the waiter and he looked back down and we continued our conversation. The waiter asked him a second time, "Excuse me, sir, how would you like your steak done?" Again, he looked at the waiter and looked back down and looked. And now we're getting worried now, because here, obviously, he doesn't understand what the waiter is telling him. So the waiter said at third time, "Excuse me, sir, how would you like your steak done?" And he looked at the waiter full in the face and he said to him, "Man, cook it now."
Oh, my word.
And we yes. And he
We
came
needed a Mr. Bentic right around the islands.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he came from a big territory. So we quickly had to say to the waiter, "He means well done." That's how we say it in the Caribbean. So,
Yes.
so we got away with that. But it surprised me that here was somebody from a big territory who didn't even understand what was meant by "how do you want your steak?"
And they looked down on us as small islanders who were ignorant.
Precisely.
And our own Mr. Harold Bentic could have been the protocol officer for the entire team.
That's right. Clearly,
Mikey, let's take a little bit of music and then we'll come back to deal with cricket in detail.
If we damage to free equipment, we should be punished, I agree. But the flogging we going to reason, or prepare for mutiny. The sun shall not smite me by day, you can't smite me by night. You alone want all these safe. Might somebody out you like, you want to beat me, you want to treat me. Anything you tell me, I have to agree. You must be think me like me mouth in a me mama. You must be think say me na Vincy too. You want to knock me, you want to flog me, you want to accuse me, ill treat and abuse me.
Mikey, is this one of your favorites because he's your homeboy?
But not only because he's my homeboy, but because it touches on the freedom of speech, and that deals with my journalism, aspect. And because there's a time when there's a subtle move by the government of the day to control, especially the National Broadcasting Corporation, NBC. They wanted to say what news you must carry, how you must carry the news, and so on. So Posa's song was in relation to that. All you were saying that, hey, you can't do that. I leave my mouth and mother, I could talk, and I have freedom of expression. So that's why I chose that song.
Okay. So let me take you back to some cricket. You told us about Trumaker Primary, you told us about the Champions Cricket Club, and well, you started touching on life as a West Indies cricketer. But before we get all the way to West Indies, let's look at it from, well, I guess beyond the domestic perspective into, say, regional cricket. How did that get started?
Let me just give you one example of another training ground that I enjoyed as a boy in the primary school. My first tour was as a member of the Chumaca Primary School, we went on a weekend tour of Lomans, Windward. We stayed at, when you're going to Georgetown, just before you meet the North Union sign, as you come around that corner, there's a small house on the right-hand side, just before you get to the corner, and just before you go into the gap to go to the Thaddeus house. It was a wooden house in those days. There's where we stayed. And below that, there's a church. There's a church below that. The church was the site of the playing field in those days. So we went to Lomans to play a weekend of cricket. Here's where I met Victor Hadley. Victor was a fantastic leg break kukuli bowler. In fact, Victor, if Victor had been born in one of the bigger territories, he would have made the West Indies team. He was in the regiment in Jamaica, and naturally played cricket in Jamaica. And they called him to practice with the West Indies team when they were up there once. And very few of the batsmen could read Victor. He made them look like a joke. So Victor was part of that tour. He played for the Lomans Primary School. He had a younger brother, Jeffrey, who also played as a batsman and an off spinner. Jeffrey went to Australia, and I think he died, unfortunately, in Australia. But there are two jokes I want to give you on that tour. Well, first of all, let me say that the Lomans Windward Primary School hosted us. So the students and teachers from that school did the cooking. They prepared our breakfast and our lunch and our dinner. Again, you see the village cooperation. The entire village came out and helped us there. And Teacher Marshall liked his liquor. But we didn't want him to get too much into that. So we hid the bottle. And Teacher Marshall, if I don't find my bottle tonight, not a soul will sleep in this house. I'll bring a snake and put it in the house. We had some fun. And then Victor said to us one evening, let's go and hunt. So we all want to go and hunt Manikou. And we figured that if we're on the Hadley's estate and a member of the Hadley family is with us, we are safe. Cleo, when we are going through, here's Victor telling us, guys, be careful, because if the watchman see you all, you can shoot. But we had great fun. So that was my first experience with touring. And it may have been insignificant to us in that days. But when you grew up and you understood what happened, here again, it was all part of your development, of your training, of your upbringing.
And I like the fact that you are now referring to it as a tour, because there are experiences that we have that we totally underrate, and we don't realize the overall contribution to who we become of those simple experiences.
Yes, those simple experiences in my rural life were fantastic. They laid a great foundation in my cricket development. Another thing that helped me along was at the Chumaca Primary School. As you entered the door of the school, right on the back of the stage, there was the MCC coaching charts, which showed you how to bat, how to keep, how to bowl, how to field. So you're seeing this every morning. The first thing you see as you enter the school was that. You were saying prayers, but that was there. Those of us who didn't shut our eyes were looking at the charts. And that left an impression.
So, Mike, I have to take it that those charts are no longer available.
I haven't seen them in ages. But they left a great impact on my own life, in my mind, because I looked at them and I used that as the yardstick for playing good cricket.
Understood.
It taught you how to gather the ball, how to feel and throw in, how to bat, how to sweep. All those shots were demonstrated or were vividly in front of you as you entered the school. And wherever you went in the school, you would see it because the school wasn't so big. Right. And then with a headmaster who has a deep passion for cricket and a games master who had a deep passion for cricket, And the people in the village, the men in the village, they all love cricket. They all came together. When I'm talking about people in Trumuka, I mentioned Harold Bentic already. John Smith, he had a bakery in Trumuka. John Smith had gone to Aruba and had spent some time there when he came back. And those islanders, when they went to Aruba, they introduced cricket to Aruba, and they played cricket there. You know, I went back to Aruba in '58 on a vacation, and they were playing a game. And my father, who was also a wicket keeper, they didn't let me keep, and I was disappointed because the guy who kept really couldn't keep. But put me in the outfield. No, he really didn't know what he's doing. But I was in the outfield, and somebody hit the ball deep and high, and I took a catch, and that impressed them. But they took their cricket to that length. They played a lot of cricket, and the people, when they returned home, they continued the cricket. John Smith owned a bus. He had a bakery, big businessman, but he loved this cricket, and he was captain of the Trumuka team. So I played on that Trumuka team as a little boy. I was a little boy playing among the men.
Quite an honor.
A big honor, and they taught you a lot.
And you started your regional career in around 1965, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so all of this primary school and the champions cricket, and so were you thinking, your MCC cricket chat, were you thinking, Thaddeus, Mikey, one of these days you're going to move beyond St. Vincent in cricket? Or was it like just where you were focusing your ambitions and your sights, or is it something that just happened by the way?
No, every young boy in those days wanted to be a cricketer at the highest level. We called ourselves the names of the West Indies cricketers. A fast bowler say he's Wes Hall. You know, a batsman would say he's Everton Weeks.
And Mikey said,
I wanted to be the best wicket keeper in the world. I loved keeping. I was keeping since I was a little boy, 7, 8. That's all I did.
Influenced by your dad or just personal preference?
No, my dad wasn't around at that time. He was in Aruba. But I don't know. I'll tell you what made my mind up. Because they had some height, I thought I could have been a good fast bowler. But then when I thought of it, I said, you know something? You're a fast bowler. So you open the bowling and you bowl 4 or 5 overs. After that, you're down to fine leg and you're out of the game. You don't do anything long fine leg. I said, that's a waste of time. You know, that's a waste of human resource. So I said I wanted to do something that would keep me in the game all the time. And that's why I went to wicket keeping, because you're in the game all the time. You have to concentrate on every single ball that was bowled. You have to look to see the weakness of the batsman and explain to your bowler and your captain. And you were determined not to allow any byes to go past you and so on and so forth. So that's
it was a big price to pay to be involved in the game full time. You're probably one of the most important people on the team.
Yes, but I hate to be lazy in whatever I do. But that's how my wicket-keeping career started. And you're talking about the at the Combined Islands level, that we played to make the Combined Islands team. We had to play 2 trial matches, the Windwards and the Leewards. And out of those matches, the Combined Islands team was selected. And we went on to play in the Shell Shield, which started in 1966. And so we played in the Combined Islands, and people like Jim Allen from Montserrat, Andy Roberts, so Viv Richards, Sargent, a good batsman from the Leeward Islands, and Sargent was unfortunately involved in the Queen, wasn't in the ferry that sank between Nevis and St. Kitts years ago. Cristiano, whatever it was. Christina, whatever it was. He was on that boat. And somebody pushed a bag of breadfruit to him, which he held on to, and that saved his life. So we used to very jokingly to pass the time, say to Sarge, you must never eat breadfruit, man. That saved your life. You know, Vance, Avery, all those guys were part of the Combined Islands. So we played these trial matches and they picked the Combined Islands team and we went on. Cleo, let me explain something about Combined Islands cricket. When the journalists in those days naturally were from cricket territories, and when they were previewing the Shell Shield for whatever year, it will go something like this. So the Shell Shield is starting next week with the first match between Barbados and the Combined Islands at Kensington Oval. So that's 16 points for Barbados. The next match for the islands will be against Trinidad at Queen's Park. That's 16 points. So before a ball was bowled, the tournament
game had already been decided.
And the Combined Islands did not have a single point. That's before the first ball was bowled. That annoyed us. It annoyed us to the point where we said we will have to shut up these people. And that drove us on in the same way that if you look at Fire in Babylon, the West Indies stars will tell you they were motivated and driven by the fact that they wanted to prove that as a black sporting team, they could be as good and better than any other team in the world. And they achieved that. Well, we wanted to achieve that, and we did. We did. We should have won the Shell Shield in 1970, that Tantimore match. I think it was 75, that Tantimore match, because we had the better of Trinidad and Tobago in that game at Queen's Park Oval. We were batting last. In the match, they weren't sure if the match ended in a tie or a draw. We had wickets in hand when the match ended. And so the West Indies board, Cricket Board of Controllers, it was in those days, wrote to the MCC in England and explained the situation to them and asked, have you ever experienced this? And if you did, what did you do? What was your decision? And the MCC wrote back and said, yes, we had a similar situation in so and so year. We didn't have provision for it. But what we did, we gave the team that batted last, and lost the few wicket, the match. We awarded them more points. If they had done that, the Combined Islands would have won the championship in 1975. And up to this day, and to my dying day, I'll keep wondering if another country had been in that position in 1975, whether or not it would have gone that way. I'll continue thinking. Maybe it's not a nice way, but that's how it is. When we got back here, Prime Minister Milton Keating said, we ain't care damn, we done win already. You know, because he thought they were unfair to us when we had won.
That Combined deserved the title, and it has been an age-old problem for us from the smaller islands. We always feel as if we are discriminated against and we're never given the benefit of the doubt, simply because of where we have come from geographically. But you quoted an example where persons from larger islands didn't have the depth of knowledge that we as small islanders had. But I suppose that's just how it was back in those days.
That's how it was. That's how it was.
And then, Mikey, from around 1968 or so, you joined the West Indies cricket team, not so? But yes. When you joined the team, you didn't actually start playing. You had to sit it out a while. Was it in New Zealand and Australia?
First it was to Australia and New Zealand, 68, 69. And
Mikey,
then,
first, tell me, how did it feel to be selected for the West Indies cricket team? This is now Mikey from Trumoka, Mikey from the cricket team in Trumoka, Mikey from Combined Islands and Windward Islands. This is now Mikey in the West Indies cricket team. How did that feel, Mikey?
It was a fantastic honor, first of all. It was a great honor. And just to the extent where I said to myself, I cannot let down the Combined Islands, the cricketers from the islands, nor the people of the islands. So I had to be, I feel, an example for those who were to come after me. I couldn't make a mistake. I couldn't let anything affect that. I would have been guilty to this day if they had allowed it to affect it. I said, I'm going to be an example for people who are coming after me. I am the first, I will not be the last. It was a fantastic honor. And, you know, I was lucky in that I played with a number of the players on the team during the Shell Shield. So I knew them. And it wasn't that I was entirely a newcomer to West Indies cricket because we played regional cricket. But people like Charlie Davis, Roy Frederick, Steve Camash, Richard Edwards from Barbados. Richard was my roommate. And we became great friends. In fact, we are such great friends that we call each other. I called him a couple of weeks ago when he was in England holidaying. And Richard named his son after me. And,
wow.
Yeah, we are such great friends. Another great friend I was Wes Hall. Wes Hall is a fantastic personality. He's such a good friend that, in fact, he's Ensila's godfather also. You know, he was
in big company.
He was. Wes was is a fantastic individual. We remained friends forever. He never called me anything but youngster on that tour. In fact, I was a youngster. I was 25 or 24, 25. And Wes would not call me anything but youngster. And because Wes had played professionally in Australia for a number of years, he knew a lot of people in Australia. And Wes would call my room and say, youngster, what are your plans for later? I said, Wes, I'm just relaxing. Okay, don't make any plans. You're going with me tonight. And he'd take me to one of his friends for dinner. And, you know, and we were extremely close. In fact, when Wes stepped down as president of the West Indies board, Wes said to me, he said, Mike, now I want you to take over after me as president. I said, Wes, no, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not. But that's the highest team he had named because we were such great friends. And you know, we would talk cricket, we talk all sorts of things. And Wes is a humorous person. I go to the gym regularly. Even in those days, I still went to the gym even after I stopped playing. And when Wes, Jean and I, by that time, were together. So she came on a few trips with me after I retired. I was an administrator then. And when Wes was introducing anybody to anybody, he'd say, this young lady is Mike's wife here. You know why he go in the gym? You got to go in the gym every day to keep up with her. That is Wes. But Wes is a fantastic personality. He talks a lot.
Such fantastic memories, Mikey.
Yes. You know, talk about memories. Clear once, a friend of mine from Trinidad came to do a TV documentary on me. So as he walked into the living room, he looked around and he said, Mike, where are the trophies? I said, trophies? I said, I'll tell you something. The trophies are probably somewhere. But the friendships I have made as a player on all the tours I've been are more valuable to me than a trophy that you could put on the wall. And I have friends all over the place and we're still in touch. And that is great. Those are my trophies. Those are my trophies.
Well said, Mikey. So take us back to 1968-69. You got selected, but you didn't actually play, even though you went on tour. What does that feel like? Well,
once you understand the system that's in place, when you're on tour, you play not only test matches. In those days, the internationals weren't introduced as yet. So we played just test matches and first-class matches, which meant that in Australia, each state you went to, like you went to New South Wales, you would play the New South Wales state team just before a test match in New South Wales. So the squad of players, 14 or 15, had a chance to play a lot of cricket. And the first class matches were used as their avenues for trying to get onto the team. In other words, if they played well in the matches, they'll gain selection. You know?
Well, obviously, at some point in June of '69, you impressed the pants off somebody, because come the 26th of June, Mikey was on the team.
Yes. So I never made the test team until in England in that second test, and it was at Lord's, and in London a lot of West Indians come out to watch. My father was there. He came out to watch, and I was so proud that I could play in front of my father and so on, and brought him into cricket and all that. So I didn't have a bad match. I think I took 5 catches and I made 25 or something there. So that wasn't a bad debut, playing at Lord's and doing that well. And nobody knew about me, because it was only in 1968 that I came to the fore. And how I came to the fore, I had been playing for the Combined Islands since 1967. That's only a year before. I didn't make the team on the first year in '66. And so the people who influenced me at the regional level were people like Frankie Thomas, the late Frankie Thomas from here, because he was a good cricketer. He was involved in West Indies cricket as an administrator. So every 10 weeks in my early days, they had sent him around to the islands to look at the cricketers and to sort of talent scout, to their talent scout. I told you about West Hall already. So Clyde Walcott, he was my second manager on that team, on that tour of England. And Jackie Hendricks was the wicketkeeper before me. There was Derek Murray. There was Jackie Hendricks first, then something happened. Then Derek took over because Derek was on tour in 1966 as a deputy to David Allen from Barbados. And David Allen fell ill, and Derek Murray took over. And with Wes Hall and Charlie Griffith bowling, Derek got record catches behind the stumps. So he was into the team from '66. But Jackie came back in '68. Jackie was in us, and Jackie was a good keeper. Jackie was the best keeper the West Indies has ever had. And these guys, we were like a team. They would sit with you, they would after the match, and they would chat with you, and they would pass tips on to you. It was a great relationship. And like I said, West Hall was my big bosom buddy, and West Hall made sure I got all the knowledge I wanted in the game. Then there was Richard Edwards, who I spoke to you about earlier, who's from Barbados, was my roommate. On the regional scene, there's a guy called Danny Livingston. He's an Antiguan, but he played county cricket for Warwickshire, I think it was. And he was a fantastic player. He didn't make the test team, but he was a good player. He was the best manager. In those days, we didn't have coaches. The manager, if he had some knowledge of cricket, would pass things on to you. But Danny was the best coach manager I have ever had. I was captain of the Combined Islands team then. And Danny and I, at evenings after each day's play, would review it. We usually have that meeting, that team meeting. But after that, Danny and I would get together again and look back from a captain's point of view. And he would plan for the next day. Danny was the kind of person who was able to plan to the very hour, each hour of play. This is what you want, Mike. This is what you ought to do. By the time this happens, we should have 5 wickets, or we should make 100 wickets maybe. And that was that year when we should have won the series. Danny was fantastic. Then there was Sir Clyde, who was the manager. Calvin Wilkins from St. Kitts. Charles Wilkins, his father. Charles himself played cricket for the Combined Islands, both left arm, leg spin. Then there's Julian Hunt from St. Lucia. There's Tony Cozier and Res Pereira. All these guys took an interest in me. And in fact, I'll give you a story of Res Pereira. Res and I became very close. And then when I'd stopped playing, one day Res and I are talking. He says, you know, you have a record in wicket keeper. And I said, record? What record are you talking about? He says, you kept a match in Guyana in 1972 against New Zealand. The New Zealand scored 502 runs. There's not a single bye. You know, nothing past you. And that is a record in itself. So I went and looked at it, and it was there in truth. I never knew that. But Res had a great interest in Combined Islands cricket. He supported the sport to do it. And Tony Cozier was fair. Tony Cozier was a fair writer, and he and I became great friends. If he wanted something from Yeah.
I just want to add, you said you went back and you fact-checked what Cozy had said to you about your record. And you said to me that on your first game, you think you may have scored 25, and you got a few wickets. Well, according to one Earl Robinson of blessed memory, you scored 23, and your first wicket was one Boycott, who went for 23 as well. Do you remember that, Mikey?
I remember that, yes. Yes, Earl of blessed memory was my great friend too. In fact, Earl reminded me of things that I couldn't even remember. And he will always write these articles when these dates were coming. He was a fantastic statistician, and we had a very good relationship. And he was one of my great fans. So you're correct. What Earl said was correct.
You spoke about some of the highlights of your career in terms of the relationships that you formed, the experiences that you had, the people that you met, some of your own personal accomplishments. What were some of the challenges for you as an individual and also as a small islander being on the West Indies cricket team?
There are a lot of challenges. The main one was one of discrimination, not in terms of your color or so, but discrimination because you were from the small island. You had to do twice, maybe 3 times as much as the people from the larger islands to be recognized. And we had to be fighting this all the time. In other words, when we went into a game, Cleo, we knew that if a batsman from the other team made 50, he's going to get a lot of praise. Our batsman would have to make 70 and 80 to get the kind of praise that we get for 30. It is as simple as that. It is as simple as that. One example is Irving Shillingford. Irving Shillingford was one of the most consistent batsmen for Combined Islands, for the Windward and Combined Islands. It is true that in those days you had a lot of top players, Kanai, Sobers, Greenwich, a lot of top and good players. But I thought that Irving could have made the team before he did. And even after he did, I think it was in 1977 when there was this breakaway that some the players went to Packer and they were playing against Pakistan, the West Indies. They had to pick an entirely new team. That's when Irving made it. Irving made 100 in his second test match, 100. They gave him one match after and then dropped him and never looked at him again. That was unfair. That had to be unfair. From my own personal point of view, I remember in 1970, my last tour of England in 1976, Derek Murray and I were keeping the keepers. But Derek had been keeping all the test matches. And one of my teammates said to me, Mike, they're giving you a hard time. I said, why you say that? He said, well, you should be keeping a test match. I said, well, that's how life is. Now, when the series was finished, Alec Hughes, the former attorney, sent me a clipping that somebody had sent in from England. In one of the county matches I had played, the writer had said it was so wonderful to see the agile and energetic Findlay behind the stumps in this match, and that told the story. But like I said, when you look back at it, Cleo, even our own administrators in the islands started discriminating against us in this way. Whenever the bigger territories came to the islands to play, they would put them in big first-class hotels. They weren't 5-star hotels then. And they'd put the Combined Islands team at guest houses. In other words, before you started, you were told that you are inferior. We recognize all this. We saw it. But we said our job is to play the cricket, let us play the cricket and embarrass them. And that's how we progressed. That's how we went on. But those are the challenges. In 1972, I mentioned New Zealand and the record in Guyana. And the people are always saying that my problem was batting, that I was not a good enough batsman. Well, in 1972, I had a good year with the bat. I played all 5 test matches against New Zealand. So the Australians came up for a tour in 73. And the first test was in Jamaica. And for the first time in the history of West Indies cricket, the selectors picked 2 wicket keepers on a home tour. Now, the principle was that on a home tour, you don't need 2 keepers because the islands are so close by. If something happens to the keeper, at any rate, a new keeper can't come into the same game. Somebody on the team will have to play, to keep. But you have time to fly somebody into the island to play the next match or to go to the next venue for the next game. So they put 2 keepers, and when I'm flying out, I flew to Barbados, and even in Barbados, there were people picking teams in my air shot. They probably didn't recognize me, and saying, well, so-and-so is going to play the first test. And my name was among them. So, Cleo, I was determined to embarrass these people. And I said to myself, I will do the best keeping that you could ever see. But whenever you do something, Cleo, you cannot be too stiff. You've got to be relaxed. Because when you're too tight and worked up, you tend to make mistakes. In that first test against Australia, I didn't play too badly. In fact, I had to open the batting in the second innings because Greenwich, the opening batsman, was injured, so he couldn't open. And I opened against people like Dennis Lee and Jeff Thompson, and neither of them got me out. I was so mad with myself. A little medium pacer got me edging the ball to slip and got me out. I was so mad. But they didn't pick me after that until 1976, 3 years after, when I sort of, in those days, the team was released in the headquarters of the West Indies, which was Trinidad. And I had a friend, Alvin Cornell from Trinidad, who called me the evening and said, Mikey, on the team. I said, on which team? He said, on the West Indies team for the English tour, 76. I said, well, I'll tell you something. Alvin, I'm glad that they've selected me. I'll go. I won't refuse the tour. But you mark my words, I will not play a single test match. Because I knew they weren't going to pick me. But I'll go. I'll go and I'll play the best cricket that I can play. So those are some of the subtle pressures that they put on people from the islands. I remember when Dennis Lilly and Jeff Thompson were wreaking havoc among cricketers. West Indies was touring Australia, and all the batsmen were backing away from them. They put Viv Richards, he was an opening batsman, to open the batting, and Viv made 100. And that's what forced Viv onto the team. That's what forced me onto the team. About my own keeping, in that same 75 series, Shell Shield series, in St.Vincent and in the Windward Islands, if a medium pacer is bowling, I'll come to the stumps, as I do for a spinner, because sometimes the batsmen will overbalance and you get a stumping and so on. So that match in Barbados, to Norbert Phillip, who was pretty quick, and Grayson Shillingford, I went up to the stumps and I was gathering as it was spinners. The match went on late in the evening. There were lights on in the pavilion. It was pretty dark. They should have stopped the game. But we thought they wanted Barbados to win. So they played. So years after, a friend of mine, whose father was the umpire in that match, Bella Paris, I was in Barbados, so we met up in Bridgetown and we were chatting. And he says, you know, Mike, well, I've never seen anything like what you did in Barbados against Barbados in that Shell Shield match. So I said to him, but don't talk about that, man. Ask your father why he played the match into the night. There was lights on in the pavilion and you were still playing the match. Why did he play? He says, Mike, I asked my old man that way. I know what he said to me. He said, listen, how you expect me to call light when Findlay up to the stumps to Norbert Phillip and Grayson Shillingford who are fast bowlers? So they had never seen that kind of keeping in their thing, and after that they had a greater respect for me. But you know, it didn't manifest itself. I only played 10 test matches. That's not 10 test matches. My ultimate aim, and I set myself targets that, listen, if you're going to be a keeper, you're going to be the best keeper in the world. You know, so I worked towards that. I practiced hard. I read a lot about keeping from all the masters who had kept before me, not only for the West Indies, but for Australia, for England, and so on. And so that's what happened. That's what life is. I mean, you don't assess life on success all the time. You have to meet the bitter and the sweet, and you have to come through them. And it's how you come through them that makes a difference to you as a person.
Your journey through the fire is what molds you. Indeed.
That's right.
Mikey, you said that when you were youngsters, you all wanted to be somebody, but you just wanted to be a wicket keeper, the best wicket keeper ever. You are also known in the world of cricket. Now, I'm no cricket historian, right? I'm getting a lot of my education right here, right now. I'm not pretending. But I know this one, that you were known to your cricketing contemporaries as the priest. Give me the story, please.
It's actually the Pope.
The Pope, okay.
The Pope. It was 1972. We were playing against New Zealand in Barbados, and they had us on the run because in the first innings, the pitch was very quick and the ball was swinging about and seaming about. So they really had us on the run. In the first case, they had lost a lot of wickets. When they went to the crease, the captain, Sir Garfield, was at the crease, and they said to him, "Skipper, I'll stay with you. You just, let's just stick out here." And he got out. And I continued. I made a few runs. I made 40, 44, something like that, not out. In the second innings, when New Zealand batted, Van Born Holder was the bowler from one end. And Van Born bowled a delivery that went down Glenn Turner's next side. He glanced it, took the edge, and I dived full length to my left and held the ball. But as I hit the ground, the ball dropped up. The ball touched the ground. But nobody saw that because as I rolled over, I had the ball in my glove. I knew the ball had touched the ground. And the umpire sent him out caught. But I went up to the captain and said, "Skipper, I'm sorry, he's not out because this is what happened." And Gary told the umpire and they called him back. But the thing is that Glenn Turner had been making a lot of runs in the series. So when we got into the pavilion, the fellas were mad. Roy Fredericks was the one who said, "Well, Mike, you must be the damn Pope. I could call the man back." So I said, "Roy, I don't like anybody to do me that. If I play the game fairly, if I take an edge, I'll walk. I feel if somebody edges the ball and it's not clearly taken, they should tell me not clearly taken. That's how the game should be played." And that was it.
Wonderful story. Noble sportsman. Wonderful story. Mikey, thank you for that. That is pure Vincy representation right there. Thank you so much, Mikey. Mikey, what would you say was the highlight of your cricketing career?
Chance, come join with me. Let's pay tribute to Mike Findlay. SVG, come jump with me and pay tribute to Mike Findlay. I am sure you all remember the achievements made by this cricketer. Now come, let's join as one and pay tribute to the man who let us pay tribute to a great Vincent. Mikey Findlay, the greatest keeper to pass through the region. Mikey Findlay, he made small island cricket start climbing the ladder. Mikey Findlay, battling injustices and pressure. Mikey Findlay, a footballer, basketballer, this great wicket keeper, a sprinter, a long jumper, a superstar goalkeeper. I say we should crown this man, SVG's greatest sportsman. Every Vincy man and woman, time to come together as one and salute a true champion. I want you politicians to know, when you're talking about national hero, don't wait till Mikey dead to put no crown on his head. So let us pay tribute to this great Vincent Shan, the greatest keeper to pass through the region. He took the combined islands to the top of the ladder. He led the Tantimore encounter against England in St. Lucia. Findlay proved a great keeper, so they dropped Murray, the world record holder. To take this man to Australia, for that alone we should crown the man, SVG's greatest sportsman. Playing New Zealand in Bimsha, no camera, no third umpire. The catch seemed spectacular, the umpire sent Glenn Turner. But Findlay told the skipper, so Gary, he did not take the catch cleanly. Everyone thought it was a joke, they call him the Pope. Oh, let us pay tribute to a true sportsman, one of the fairest out of the Caribbean, an athlete of integrity. Win or lose, he played honestly. He's so cool, he's so humble, a great role model, a perfect example for all sports people. I am going to crown this man as the greatest sportsman. The WICB cook up the conspiracy to bring back Derek Murray. They victimized Mike Findlay, but Findlay ignored all this and continued to play his cricket. We all know he was the best, so Murray played all the tests. Oh, let us pay tribute to a great Vincent Shan, the greatest keeper to pass through the region. He opened the door for the small island cricketer, while battling prejudicial torture. Zelda cricket and soccer, this quiet achiever, a very strong leader, a great team player. I am going to crown this man, the Caribbean's greatest sportsman. Let us pay tribute to this all-round sportsman, the best to pass through the Caribbean. No other one I know played so many games at such a high level. Mikey, I like the way he used to dive down the leg side, and I like the way he used to dive on the offside. In front, first and second slip. Right up at the stump for the fast bowler. You leave the crease, you expire. A spectacular goalkeeper. Wherever he played, he thrilled the spectator. It was such a beauty to see Mikey goalie, especially when he went flying in the field. A self-taught sportsman. Back then we had no coaches in the Caribbean. Gentleman, he retired early from regional play, so a young caddy could have his day. Let me say thank you, Mikey, for being a good role model for me. The whole SVG, we love you so much, dear Mikey.